Goldberg's WCW run is a tale of two halves. The first half saw him explode in popularity and become the most popular wrestler in the entire company. His no-nonsense style coupled with his efficiency made him stand out easily. As time went on, it of course got harder to book him properly because he had never lost, and once he did lose, it wasn't exactly the beginning of the end, but a lot of bad stuff started happening to him. So WCW had the amazing out-of-this-world idea to turn him heel. The heel turn was extremely odd because the fans weren't ready to boo Goldberg, but the man looked 99 overall. He would clear the opposition with ease, and it seemed like nobody came close to him, so they turned him face again after refusing to follow the script. They even had these commercials about how he would go into business for himself, letting down the fans and Vince Russo. I explained this storyline in this video when Goldberg turned heel, so this is a sequel. Just want to set the stage. Goldberg was a heel, but then he faced Kevin Nash and Scott Steiner, and he refused to follow the script. He didn't want to go through with it. That's the storyline. Alright, on the August 14th, 2000 episode of Nitro, Vince Russo kicked off the show wanting to fire Bill Goldberg, but because Brad Siegel objected, he couldn't do anything about it. So instead, Russo was going to have Tank do his dirty work. He said that in the real world, Goldberg isn't a tough guy, and basically, what happens next is real. That's basically what he's trying to say. He's like, oh, Goldberg's accomplishments, all of that, it's scripted. The commentary was left extremely confused by these out-of-script actions, and the brawl with Goldberg was very one-sided, and at one point flipped the announce table over Russo. Later that night, he proceeded to go after Jeff Jarrett before saying that there's one down and two to go. He dropped Medeja with a jackhammer through the table at the end of the show. Things are crazy. On Thunder, he sent a message to Scott Steiner, dropping his brother Rick with a pipe before asking him, hey, how's Medeja doing? It was almost impossible to keep this man contained. He went through Russo's security guards before he shouted at him to touch him. It's like, oh, touch me, this and that. Now, of course, he had some leverage threatening to fire Goldberg, and they tried to calm things down before bringing out a release form. He promised that Goldberg will receive his money in full, and he could show up anywhere next Monday. Nope. He refused. So Vince Russo went on to inform Goldberg of the problems he has with the likes of himself, Kevin Nash, and Scott Steiner. His dumbass mentioned his girlfriend, and he almost gave him a beating when Scott Steiner popped up on the screen with Goldberg's girl. Once Bill arrived to the hotel room, Steiner sent him a message to come back to the arena, that she's okay for now. At the end of the night, Steiner came out shouting that the freaks are the only thing that make him happy, so he was fuming about this. He's like, Goldberg crossed the line when he messed with Medeja, and even said that he wouldn't be caught with a bitch. This ugly. Oh, man. This turned out to be a setup as Jarrett blasted him with a chair. The ring fills up. Booker T makes a save, and just as they have it figured out, Rick Steiner comes in with a pipe, and Tony Schiavone sounded so uninterested at some points. They were handcuffed, and Goldberg was forced to watch his girl get locked in the Steiner recliner. Okay, things are wild. You know, the video just started, things already crazy. And that's how it literally felt when making this video. Goldberg's way of rebounding was something else. He promised to bury Vince Russo alive after taking these men out. To put it simply, he's next. His only worry at this point was to make his life a living hell. Goldberg went after his guys, Booker went after Nash, and Russo was finished. It got to the point where Russo needed Big Vito's help, and that was flipped on its head, and Goldberg told him to take out the trash. He brought him to the desert where Bret Hart, of all people, appeared. He had a score to settle with Russo over Montreal and was ready to end him, but since Bret Hart hated Goldberg more than the devil himself, he dropped him with a shovel, which led to the commentary believing the band was getting back together. They're of course referring to the NWO, which was in a weird place with Bret Hart as the leader with Jarrett, Nash, and Steiner. Also, watching this again is funnier when you see what the Hitman has said about Goldberg these past few years. Russo is very high for somebody that almost got buried, and he felt so good about this that he booked a War Games match with the Triple Cage structure. This thing will make you dizzy if you hear and see the rules for it, but anyways, it was going to be a 4-on-4 War Games match for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. How does that work? I don't know. But actually, I know. It's just very odd. Goldberg was able to compete despite the desert incident, but in order to qualify, he had to beat the franchise. As expected, he had to go through hell, but these mid-carders were no match in the end. So now Goldberg got the title shot. If he wins, the no contact clauses and he can't touch Russo is gone. The match itself was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was so random and at times goofy. And what's funny is that this sounds like a pay-per-view match, a match that would be on a big show, but it was done 2 weeks before Fall Brawl. Goldberg at times looked strong, but of course in the end it didn't end well for him. This time Bret Hart slammed the cage door in his face and Nash retains the title. Okay, whatever, this was one of the worst things. It was just jumbled up and very random, you know, like I'm not gonna say it's not entertaining, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that's entertaining about the storylines that I'm watching and stuff like that, but they're not coherent. But anyways, for Goldberg, he had to take time to focus on the Hitman. Later that week on Thunder, he destroyed a bunch of security in an effort to confront Bret Hart, but nobody was in the room. As for Bret Hart, his bitterness came down to Goldberg almost ending his career and having zero regard. He also held resentment for nobody caring, and when Goldberg came out, he told him to finish the job. The Hitman was hopping all around the ring in fear, and this is when Goldberg explained why he didn't immediately go after him. He said that he had some remorse for his actions and sometimes wishes that it happened to him instead. Bret shouted, yeah, it should have happened to you. I wish that every single day. Then he started complaining about the lack of phone phone calls. Goldberg cares about himself, and he claimed that he ended his career because he wanted to. For him, though, it was simply a job, and he ponders over where he would be if it happened to him instead. He backed off, but then Hart pressed him before walking into an attack, and this is when the Hitman called him a stupid idiot and left him with Steiner in the recliner. This was Bret Hart's final appearance in WCW, which was odd, like you feel like Bret Hart might have come back, but he didn't. When you look at the time period itself, you feel, oh, maybe there's a chance he'll return, but he did not return. He retired for good. Later that night, Goldberg rebounded. He was looking for a fight, and Team Canada on behalf of Bret Hart accepted. For all this talk, they refused to back it up initially. Skipper, he tried to show some of that primetime athleticism, but walked into a spear, and Storm was sent back to 1999 with that throw and spear. Easy victory, and things were looking up for Goldberg, whereas Russo, Nash, and Steiner were going down. Russo was missing because he suffered a concussion during the War Games match, and the other two were set to face off for the title with Booker T as the referee and Goldberg as the enforcer. This main event was wild. The two baby faces brawled with the heels, and just as they have it figured out, Mike Awesome brings the natural born thrillers and the bus like they're coming from school and turned things around. Steiner continued the attack, leaving Goldberg handcuffed to the bus and assaulting him, so he responded by coming in a motorcycle and dropping him with a spear and jackhammer on Thunder. The Goldberg and Scott Steiner feud was more about Vince Russo. Other than that, these two just hated each other, assaulted the other's woman, brought out lead pipes, steel chairs, all kinds of things. It was very violent. The match itself, though, wasn't memorable. It wasn't bad, but it doesn't stand out, especially seeing as what WCW was doing at the time, because whatever was memorable at the time wasn't really that good. Vince Russo made his return with a baseball bat, and despite his efforts, Steiner had to put a little more work to win it and needed shots from Adeja as well. Still not enough. Distractions, pipe shots, and it finally comes to an end. Bro celebrating like he did all the work. It was solid stuff, but this story wasn't that interesting. The next night on Nitro, Vince Russo claimed that he received a letter in the mail from Goldberg claiming he quit WCW. Steiner took credit for making him quit, and Vince Russo once again talked the talk. Before he knew it, Goldberg was in the crowd, and returning to action didn't take long because he faced Steiner in a cage match later on. Right before the match, they had a brawl, and I should note the cage match was impromptu. It was a normal match, but they randomly made it a cage match. Goldberg won it and went after Russo later that night during his title match with Booker T. He's getting his ass kicked during the match. Booker's shouting, "Don't hate the player, hate the game," and Goldberg comes out. Why would Booker not exit here to retain the title? I don't know, but Goldberg dropped Russo with a spear through the cage, and he was champion. They were unaware and dapping up each other, while Vince Russo was literally crowd champion. They were unaware of what had gone down. Of course, this didn't mean the feud between the two was over, because that's talking funny. Goldberg still wanted the champion and went through security once again. Poor Jeremy Borash was pissing himself in fear, and what is this vehicle? Of course, Goldberg didn't touch Russo here because he threatened to fire him, and this is when things get tough. Russo said that Goldberg has to begin his streak again. This time, if he loses again, he has to leave WCW. If he wants a title shot, he has to beat his 174 record win. Vince once again stuck himself in an awkward situation by pressing him, and from out of nowhere, Meng was here. Russo revealed that he was the first opponent for tonight, and for Meng, it was just business. Taking out Goldberg is necessary for him, and it was as he said, "Goldberg, you must die, so I live." Mike Sanders made Goldberg compete again. He beat Meng with ease and was confronted by Chronic, who destroyed him. When Goldberg learned of his match, he wasn't even worried and went back like he forgot something. This time, he had to face the Harris brothers. He went through them with ease, and these matches were actually counted as 2 victories. So who's next? Big Vito. He had some fight, but you guys know how it ended. So now he's 4-0. Johnny the Bull afterwards decided to go after Vito, and Goldberg returned. He dropped him with a spear and jackhammer combo, and the ref counted the fall for 5-0. The match didn't even begin. Nobody knew what was going to happen, but Goldberg was 5-0, all while Chronic watched on from a distance. They should have had Goldberg randomly spear people outside and have them count it as victories. That would have been something. Chronic was supposed to face Goldberg at Halloween Havoc. I should note it was set. But in the meantime, Goldberg had to face a couple of opponents. Chuck Palumbo was next, and the man was so fearful, he tried talking to his mom about it. He put up a fight initially with strikes, but despite his size, he was unable to knock him down and relied on interference. Still not enough. Stasiak takes a spear, and Palumbo's next. There's the jackhammer, and he's 6-0. Well, actually 7-0 after pinning Stasiak. Later that night, he got into it with Chronic during an all-out brawl. His hatred and eagerness to fight them almost brought another brawl, but Mike Sanders didn't want a big match in front of these fans. For Chronic, it's about breaking necks and cashing checks, and facing Goldberg will make them a lot of money. Bryan Adams said losing to Goldberg is unrealistic and almost insulting. Goldberg responded to this, telling them that they're next and was ready for a fight. After Bill's voice brought him to collapse, Mike Sanders felt inspired to involve David Flair in this situation. He was mauled and destroyed in front of his dad, which wasn't a pretty sight. And later that week on Thunder, Goldberg had a wild night. He was all over the place. He's pissed, he's fuming when suddenly he runs into Ron Harris, who said something and took a strike. Prime time, meanwhile, was next. All that trash talk amounted to absolutely nothing. As for Chronic, Goldberg tried to rebound but was unsuccessful, and Stasiak once again had to suffer for this. It still wasn't the end of the night for him. He ran in during the Battle Royal, and this time it worked very well in his favor. And after a moment with that 70s guy, he helped him win the Battle Royal by costing Chronic the opportunity. Clark and Adams had a lot riding on this match and felt that if Goldberg were to beat them, he would be the baddest person in WCW. That's not going to happen though in their ass. Kevin Nash meanwhile pushed Shawn Stasiak to the test. The test? It was Goldberg. You know how it ended, and I was 12-0. Next up was a tag team match involving Chronic, and this was the closest Goldberg came to losing the streak up to this point. But with the help of Sting and Booker T, he pulled through and they won it. At the event, Chronic spread a rumor of Goldberg being injured, and their claims were proven to be true. And when asked about it, he refused to forfeit. Clark and Adams weren't worried because regardless, they were getting paid. Goldberg doesn't wrestle, his streak is over, and he's gone from WCW as well. When it came time for the main event, and this was the main event over the title match, which was crazy in itself, Goldberg was nowhere to be found, and Chronic believed they won the match. Turns out he was cleared, and the momentum swung in his favor for all of 1 minute because Chronic went right on the attack. He was overwhelmed by the attack and his hopes were slowly fading away, but a single counter opened things up and Goldberg eliminates Clark. Adams takes advantage, but not for long as he takes a spear and then the jackhammer to win it. All in 3 minutes. So it's on to other things. The next night on Nitro, Goldberg said that he reflected on who he was. He finally realized who he was, and Chronic found out last night. He then sent a message to the locker room saying they're next. Lex Luger meanwhile put his name out there saying he wants a piece of Goldberg. Bam Bam Bigelow had enough as well and wanted to put an end to this streak. Luger was so confident of his chances saying Goldberg had this streak because he wasn't around and called it a bogus one. He confronted him later on and praised himself endlessly before Bam Bam came in with a pipe and dropped him. He shouted in anger that both of them are next for the setup. This seemed to have given Bam Bam an advantage for the main event. With Lex Luger on the ramp, it was very possible for the streak to end. Nope, it wasn't. For some reason, he got a rematch, and Lex Luger was featured in the match to make it a triple threat. And to top it all off, Chronic attacked the referee before the match. As for Goldberg, this was his toughest match yet. He was double teamed and didn't show much offense for most of the match. But once he made his comeback, Luger didn't get much and let Bam Bam take the L. The total package at this moment finally realized what he was going up against. Goldberg followed up by destroying Alex Wright and Disco, and Luger still tried getting on his bad side by constantly talking about Bill's book. He expressed disappointment over Goldberg never mentioning him in his book despite being the very same person who discovered him, and it was also ironic to him because he was going to be the one to end his career. Goldberg meanwhile brought his streak to 21-0. Even though he had the opportunity to make his match with Luger a title match, which let me explain why. It was because Ric Flair was running things and didn't care about Vince Russo's stipulations. Goldberg cost Luger the title, so it didn't matter to him. The commentary ended up explaining that the reason why the streak is still intact, unlike the title shot, was because of Vince Russo. He wasn't around, but he was the only person that could end this decision, that could reverse this decision. With that said, Luger ended up being a bit smarter than others, but ultimately he was unable to stop the Goldberg streak and it continued. Forgettable match, I should note. Wasn't that much. It's expected, right? They said he's 25-0, which is either because of live events or stat padding. I don't know. Lex Luger, though, wasn't finished with Bill Goldberg. He announced that this was the end of the streak on Nitro. The next night, explained things deeply. So why would he say such a thing despite losing the previous night? He claimed that when Goldberg speared the referee, he lost by disqualification, so now Luger was the winner. The total package went on to say that Goldberg was out of here and demanded his appeal receives an answer from Ric Flair. About that, yeah, Flair didn't agree, saying Luger was the one who pushed the ref in the way, and since Goldberg wasn't satisfied with the victory, the Nature Boy made a rematch for Starrcade. Goldberg later on destroyed Reno before Luger came in with a chair. Goldberg had some PlayStation lag and sold it a bit late, and then he was locked in a torture rack. He started trashing Goldberg later on and brought Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker up. For context, he was the one that was training wrestlers at the power plant. One of those guys trained under him was Goldberg, and he tried to cast a wedge between them, saying he's stuck in that gym, whereas Goldberg's driving in his Mercedes. Meanwhile, Goldberg, he's 30-0 something. I don't even know at this point. They're saying random numbers. Some of them were true, actually. At the end of the night, the two rivals once again crossed paths when the total package caught Goldberg from out of nowhere and used a chair on him. He was for the most part always one step ahead of him and always made mention of the book. Why? Because there's no real reason. He just wanted to press Goldberg. And once again, on Thunder, he attacked Sarge and almost cost Goldberg his match with the franchise. And to top it all off, he convinced Sanders to book the Sarge against Goldberg. Why? So let me explain things deep. Sarge wanted a match with Lex Luger, but in order to get that match, he had to face Goldberg. It was unbeknownst to Bill that he was facing his trainer because Jindrak and O'Hare stole his monitor, and once he realized what's up, he tried ending it before it began. Sarge won the match though, and after Luger came out, he forced the match and got his ass beat. But he had to do it to get Lex Luger on Thunder. As expected, the total package made a mockery out of Goldberg and whooped his trainer's ass. With that said, the match between Luger and Goldberg just happened. There's not much notable about it. I've said that a lot, but it's true. Luger brought out some brass knucks, but it wasn't enough to keep Goldberg down, and Buff accidentally dropped him. This was proven to be a lie, as Buff assaulted the Sarge while Goldberg was wrapping up the win. After the match, he blasted him with a chair and walked away with the total package. As a result of his actions, the Stuff had to step in the ring with the undefeated Goldberg. This was no problem though, because Luger was right by his side to cause the DQ. Dwayne Bruce, the Sarge, made the save leading to Goldberg rebounding. The feud would continue later on, but for now, Goldberg was 33-0. The storyline between Luger, Bagwell, and Goldberg was just bully Dwayne Bruce, make fun of Goldberg's book, that's it, and it was dragging. Mark Jindrak, meanwhile, was next, and it meant Goldberg was steamrolling his way into sin. His match at the pay-per-view was a tag match teaming up with Dwayne Bruce to face Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger. If either of them lose, Goldberg has to retire and leave WCW. After the match, he said that time was ticking and told the two that they should wipe their names off of WCW after losing. They didn't give a damn about this, and then later that night, with the help of Chronic, they jumped him and kicked him out of the arena, all while Bruce was getting mauled in the ring. This attack gave Goldberg an urgency to return the favor to Chronic. Luger and Bagwell had a great idea to get them in a match against the two, and when they asked for some cash, their request was denied. Why? Because it was an official WCW match, and so Chronic were left pissed because they were mercenaries, they loved the money, it was basically like the APA in the WWF. While this match ended up being good for Goldberg, Bruce's arm was destroyed beyond the attack from Thunder, and when he tried to make the save, they dropped him. He interfered in both teams' match with each other on Thunder and told Luger and Bagwell that they can run, but they can't hide. 4 days, they're next. About that match, let's just say it was unpleasant. I mean, what do you expect? The sad part is Goldberg, who looked almost unstoppable, had to be stopped by a kid with mace. Luger and Bagwell had to use a chair to neutralize him, and after the double team, they beat Goldberg to silence the crowd. The crowd wasn't even making noise, they weren't booing, none of that, they were quiet. What a dull ending to the streak. It just happened and felt insignificant. Obviously, half of the people Goldberg beat were lower carders, but still. Now, let me explain things. Apparently, Goldberg was supposed to have surgery for his shoulder. I couldn't find much about it from that time period, but that's what they've been saying. And it makes sense because he literally disappeared for a while. You know, he didn't come back a month later, 2 months, none of that. He was still under contract. One thing for sure is that this was Bill Goldberg's final appearance in WCW as they were preparing to change things up. That didn't materialize, and instead WWF purchased them. Overall, the streak storyline was odd. It felt like WCW wanted to capture the feeling of his past, but failed to realize that the original streak was organic and came at a special time. Here, it felt like, oh, we gotta do it like the old days without realizing why it worked so well. Goldberg's contract with Time Warner was set to expire on June 30th, 2003, so he was being paid even after WCW ended. The Vince Russo part of this feud was so confusing and very random. Goldberg's going off script in a program that's supposed to be considered real. Russo's winning the title. That whole War Games match, it was weird. And after he left, there was some semblance of coherence to the stories. They weren't that good. It's cool seeing Goldberg destroy the opposition, but his true place on the card was up top in the main event scene. And Lex Luger's storyline just dragged on and on and on and on and on for the sake of it. He was expected to return, of course, in May or something, but WCW ended, and so he sat home for about a year and a half before accepting a buyout in May of 2002, which saw him receive almost the amount he originally signed for, which was almost $3 million. Damn. And then he featured for Pride and competed in All Japan later in August of 2002. So yeah. Alright, so once again, this was not supposed to be the original video. I had a certain prince in mind, and that I was actually working on it for the most part. You know, I was actually substantially working on it, and if I truly wanted it today, I probably would have uploaded it. But I pushed it back. I was like, till another time. The reasons come down to me not feeling it's right to release it now. It'd be a good idea. But yeah, this video was weird. With Goldberg, the whole storyline was jumbled up. As I said, the later storylines kind of made sense, but the first part with Vince Russo was just so weird. I hope to make more WCW videos in the future. You know, final days of Bret Hart. Sting's heel turn would probably... I don't know if we can make a Sting heel turn video from 99. It's probably going to be very short. But I got a couple of ideas in mind. Alright, what do you guys think of Goldberg's other streak? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the spear on the like button, or perhaps the jackhammer on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.